This tariff situation is one of the best opportunities for Amazon sellers to happen in the last few years. In this video, I'm going to explain why that is, as well as go over some near-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions that sellers should use and that we're using with our portfolio brands to get through the tariff situation even stronger than before and take advantage of the huge opportunity that this is opening up for us. I'm also going to give you guys a way to access a guide that we've put together to help brand owners navigate this situation with the tariffs that we're continually updating as we publish new updates to it on Notion. And later on, I'm going to bring on my buddy Gary Huang, and he's going to go over what he calls the 10 commandments of tariff survival, and we will discuss together some of the strategies that we sellers are using to get through this situation with tariffs stronger than ever. So first of all, why is this an opportunity? It's an opportunity because Americans aren't going to stop buying stuff. The purchasing is still going to be happening no matter what. Amazon's not going to stop selling stuff. Americans aren't going to stop buying stuff no matter what the tariffs are, right? So maybe it causes prices to go up, but even if they do, they go up for everyone. Meanwhile, the uncertainty of the situation naturally scares off people who didn't take the business seriously before. So people who viewed this as a hustle, just like some crypto hustle or some day trading hustle, they're going to run off to the next hustle because now it seems too uncertain, it seems too hard. Meanwhile, those of us who have always viewed this as a real business are going to stick around and fortify our businesses using this as an opportunity to reinforce every element of our business so that we come out stronger than before. And not only that, but we are well suited to fill the gap that's left by the sellers who ran away. And that's why for strong sellers, this is the biggest opportunity that's come along in a very long time for the Amazon seller community. And here's the thing. As of posting this video, the tariffs have hiked all the way up to something like 145% for Chinese goods, and it varies category to category. But nobody seriously thinks that this is going to be the number that we stick with long term. Trump has already said that they're likely going to start negotiations with China, and they're intending on negotiating with China. So this isn't something that's going to stick around for the long term, but it is going to scare away the non-serious sellers really quickly. That's why this is a huge opportunity. Albert Einstein said, in every crisis is opportunity. Warren Buffett said, when everyone is greedy, I get fearful, but when everyone is fearful, I get greedy. And those are two smart guys. So what's going to happen is these tariffs are going to reach an equilibrium eventually, and it's going to be something that, whatever it ends up being, affects all sellers equally, but a bunch of the sellers are going to get scared away completely. So even though the prices are going to go up across the board, however much they go up, whether it's a little or a medium or a lot, they're going to go up for everyone, but there's just going to be a lot less competition. Meanwhile, Americans are going to keep on buying stuff. That's never going to stop. So all that really means is less competition. And in the meantime, smart sellers are using this as an opportunity to fortify their business, to renegotiate with their supplier at a time where their supplier is most apt to negotiate because they're most desperate, to tighten up the cost base of their product and their packaging to maximize margin, which is something that we should all be doing anyway, but this is sort of a forcing function to force us to do that to maximize the margin of the product. To test content and figure out what thumbnail changes and listing changes are needed to justify higher price points, which is something that helps our margin in the long term anyway. All of these things are things that make the business stronger in general. And while your business is stronger, your competitors are falling off. So strong brands are just getting stronger and stronger, while the weaker brands are just falling off, or the unserious brands are just falling off, creating an environment where strong brands can just take over their competitive landscape because there's just less competition than there was before. Now, I'm going to open up our guide to surviving and thriving through the tariffs, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and we're going to go through just a few of the tactics that you can try to employ as you're navigating this uncertain time for the tariffs and fortify your business for the long term. I'm not going to go through all of these, but like I said, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to get this guide for yourself later on in the video. So first of all, this graph of how it went down in just a few months, and most importantly, just a few weeks, shows how ridiculous the situation is and why it's very unlikely that these numbers stick around. This was just a huge tit for tat, you tariff me, I'll tariff you back war between the US and China that caused this whole situation. Both parties have already acknowledged that these numbers are ridiculous, and most serious experts don't believe that these numbers are going to be sticking around. These are called anchor numbers. It's a common tactic in a negotiation where you put a ridiculous number out there so that whatever reasonable number you land on seems low. Firstly, there's an advantage to sellers who have already cleared their inventory. The longer ago you cleared your inventory, the lower the tariff was likely to have been, and the more stock you'll have in that you can sell at a reasonable price, which gives you a little bit more of a time window and a little bit more of a buffer between now and the inevitable price hikes that will happen across mostly all categories as a result of this. Now, if you don't have a bunch of inventory in and you have to continue placing orders, during this most uncertain time before the tariffs reach an actual serious equilibrium, the game plan is just order as much as you need to stay in stock and not go out of stock. Your competitors are not going to be staying in stock. There's going to be a bunch of competition that's going out of stock, which is not just going to hurt their sales, but it's going to hurt their ability to rank long term. If you can stay in stock during this period, there's a massive opportunity for you to take over more market share. So just order what you need to stay in stock, and we'll go over some other tactics to make sure that you do that without losing money. Now, one of the challenges that these tariffs pose for sellers is cash flow challenges. So even if you can sell economically at a given tariff rate that you're assessed, you still might not have the cash flow because you didn't plan for it to make that purchase and pay the tariff on the purchase as it comes in. One way to get around this is a bonded warehouse. So bonded warehouses allow you to defer the tariff payment. You still have to pay it, but you just don't have to pay it right away. You can accept the local shipment of inventory, and then you can pay the tariff only as it leaves the warehouse. Since serious brands know this already, a lot of these bonded warehouses are booked out, but contact your freight forwarder and or customs broker. They are much more likely to be able to hook you up with a bonded warehouse that they already have a relationship with. Next is what's called tariff engineering, where you can take a look at what your product is being classified as and see if it could potentially be classified as something different with a different level of tariffs. This could potentially change your tariff rate based on classifying the product differently. Now, you can't classify it as something that it completely is totally not, but a lot of products can sit in multiple classifications, totally legitimately. So it's worth looking through the classifications, using the government website, and talking to your customs broker to see if there's another tariff schedule you could land in that would lower your overall tariff load. This is a time to avoid aggressive discounting and also likely start to try to test out higher price points so that you can get data back about how higher prices affect your sales. Another thing you're going to want to do during this period is figure out what you need to do in the thumbnail and in the listing to justify higher prices so that when the prices inevitably do rise in the category, you are poised to be able to justify that higher price and hence take a larger portion of the overall clicks from all the impressions, and from those clicks take a larger portion of the overall sales. Next, it's time to become an expert at the HTS code, the Harmonized Tariff Schedule code assigned to your product. Talk to your customs broker and or your freight forwarder and see if they can help you to navigate the situation of different HTS codes that apply to your product. There's a government website, hts.usitc.gov, that you can go on to research this, but I'd highly recommend that you work with your customs broker and talk it out. Monitor price changes. This is an important one. So you can use Amazon's own brand analytics, and you can use third-party tools like Helium 10 to monitor the price changes in your market so that you know if you're behind or ahead of the price hikes in your competitive landscape, and you can generally stay in line with it. You don't want to be too ahead of it because really you might lose ranking if you jack your price too high too quick. You don't want to be behind it either because then you're just wasting lower cost sales that might not be profitable to you. You'll really want to raise your prices in tandem with the market. So it's a good idea to keep a close eye on the average prices for your competitive landscape in your niche. Cutting costs. Here's another way to turn this into a competitive advantage for you. Using this as an opportunity to go back through all of the design of your product and the manufacturing process of your product, the packaging of the product, and figure out how to slim down costs, make things simpler, use less material, and research ways to decrease the cost base of your product. A potential avenue to decrease your tariffs is to get the raw materials or a partially assembled product from your original factory in China, assuming that you're manufacturing in China, and then have it the rest of the way created or assembled in another country, like a nearby country like Vietnam or Thailand or Mexico. Now, the only thing about this strategy you have to be wary of is you can't just manufacture the full product and then have somebody slap a sticker on it, the very last step, and then say it's made in Mexico. There has to be a significant transformation of the product. At least 50% of the value or utility of the product has to come from that last stage in order for it to be considered made there. Now, there's a big gray area in how that's defined. So this is where we start to get into, there's white hat, perfectly by the book, and then black hat, totally illegal, and then a big gray area in between. And every seller is going to have a different level of comfortability with different strategies that lie somewhere on that gray spectrum. And speaking of that gray spectrum, these manufacturers in China have, long before these new tariffs, known all kinds of different strategies to minimize tariffs for their customers, because they know that their customers can buy more if they're paying less for tariffs. Billing the raw materials, having two different entities, one for services, one for actual parts. Again, this comes down to your comfortability, because some of these tactics that Chinese factories and sellers are already used to are going to sit somewhere in that gray area depending on what the strategy is. But it is worth talking to your factory. And another thing that you can do with your factory is put the onus on them. If you ship DDP, delivery duties paid, it puts the onus on them to get those duties paid however they do it. And that's completely up to them. So if they quote you per unit DDP, it takes the onus off you to figure it out and do all of your own little engineering and hacks, puts the onus over on them. Okay, getting into some longer term stuff, this is a perfect opportunity to explore manufacturing elsewhere. If you believe that China and the US will continue to stay locked in a sort of trade battle, then this is a good excuse to look for manufacturing other places like India, Thailand, Vietnam, Mexico. There's plenty of other places as well where you can manufacture your product for a similar or even a lower price. Even if you don't move all your manufacturing over there, it is still a good idea to have an option. And if you have two different places or two different ways to manufacture your product, then it makes it less risky in the future if tariffs do change in one or the other country. Inside this guide, we've included some countries based on the category that products are in that are most likely to have good quality manufacturing for that category. Okay, now let's get into this chat between me and my good buddy Gary to go through his 10 commandments of tariff survival. Gary, welcome, dude. Let's talk tariffs, man. You and I go way back. In fact, we lived in China together. The whole
Yes.
source of this tariff issue, well, the source is really actually over here. But we
Yeah.
lived in China together. We were Amazon sellers over living in Shanghai. Now we've both moved out. You're over in Japan. I'm in New Jersey. So yeah, let's talk tariffs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that, ancient Chinese saying, with crisis comes opportunity. So I think this is an opportunity if sellers strategically look at this the right way. So commandment number one is your customs broker is your new best friend. All right. So for those of you guys that don't know, your customs broker is basically your agent that tells you the amount of duties and tariffs that you have to pay when you land your product in the US. Okay. So there's a lot of fine tuning when it comes to HTS codes. So that's just like jargon for like the harm like the category code of your product, right? So there's different classifications, and there's possible ways that you can legally get your product reclassified under a different HTS code to reduce your duty and possibly reduce your tariff. So that's one way that you can get this possibly lowered. There are some exemption categories that we're seeing when it comes to certain electronics, semiconductors. I believe smartphones like Apple got their like butts saved because I believe they were part of the latest updates from the White House, right? There were certain categories that were allowed to be exempt from that. But I mean, basically, the customs broker, they're the person that can answer your specific question about your specific products. So definitely talk to them to find out the details um, about your duties and your tariffs. That's number one. That's key.
No, yeah, just research. There's a website. It's hts.usitc.gov. We'll put it in the
Yeah.
description. That's the official government website for the tariff classifications, and you can just research plus talk through it with your customs broker and see if there's anything that could save you
Yeah.
some
Okay.
percentage points here and there.
Yeah, so that was number 1, the customs broker, and then number 1 and 2, I kind of blended together because number 2 is to look for tariff exemptions in certain categories. There's also another thing that is called a duty drawback, and then this is um, associated with the U.S. Customs. And basically, in certain cases, if you had like product refunds, or if you imported into the U.S. and let's say you exported that to Canada, there's certain cases that you actually file for a duty drawback and legally get some of your duties refunded to you. So again, this is on a case by case basis, depending on the circumstances of your business. But that's related to your customs broker. So talk to your customs broker about that as well to get possibly a duty drawback and some of that refunded to you. Number 3, so one of the things that you can do is you can actually if you're importing these shipments, you can hold these shipments in what they call bonded warehouses. So if you once you import into the US, if you put it in a bonded warehouse, you don't have to pay the duty right away because it's like a duty free zone. So Chris,
Yeah,
you
it's a
probably remember
deferral.
yeah, back in Shanghai, there were like bonded warehouses, like in, like the port, right? So there's similar options that you can consider depending on where you're importing your products to. So that's one way to possibly defer paying those tariffs.
The bonded warehouses, a lot of them are getting booked out like months in advance now. But
Yeah,
talking to the supplier and having them keep stock on hand is another way where you can actually, if they'll keep stock on hand on your behalf without you, creating the actual purchase order. You can defer both, defer
that's
the
right.
payment and also, the amount based on what the tariff changes because it's changing so frequently, right? And
Yeah,
we all believe that this is really just being used as a negotiation chip, and it's not going to be like this
right,
forever.
right,
So the
right.
more that your supplier can give you terms and hold stock for you, the better.
China right now is China goods imported to the US is at 145% tariffs. Okay. So it's stacking up. Whereas the rest of the world, originally Trump said there were reciprocal tariffs. So basically reciprocal means, like Vietnam, like, you know, puts duties on American products, let's say at like, I'm just going to throw a number out there, like 92%, right? So America reciprocates by slapping a tariff duty on Vietnamese products into the US at 46%. So originally, Trump had these two huge plaques, kind of like the Ten Commandments, that he was like brandishing, like with all the different country names and all the different tariff rates. But then 70 countries called up, the U.S. and they're willing to negotiate. So but China retaliated, right? So China retaliated with like an 84% tariff on US goods, right? So basically what happened was Trump said, okay, those other countries, they were calling us, we're going to drop all the other countries tariffs down to the baseline 10%. We're going to pause it for 90 days. Okay, so the key date to remember is 90 days, 10% for all the other countries. So that's India, that's Vietnam, that's, Thailand, etc. Right? But for China, it's up to 145%. And then they're waiting for China to come to the negotiation table to get this sorted. Okay. Command number 4 is to audit your SKUs, audit your product catalog. And for the ones that are underperforming, you got to kill those off. You really got to audit your SKUs to eliminate the ones that are not performing.
It's like basically an excuse to clean house. Like products that you were
Yeah.
already on the fence about, those are the ones that you can consider killing so that you could focus more attention on the ones that are the most profitable, or have the biggest potential for growth, but not to overreact as well. Like we don't want
Yeah.
to just like shut down the whole business or shut down, a bunch of ASINs just out of fear, because
Yeah.
that's what we're counting on our competitors to do so that we can take over their spots, right? So the whole
That's
point is
right.
to make the business better and stronger, not to overreact and kill your own, baby through this
Yeah.
process. That's what
Yeah.
the unsophisticated sellers are going to be doing, while we
Yeah.
are just doing everything to make our margins better, to
Yeah.
improve the efficiency of our supply chain, to improve our catalog, and then we come out stronger. And since we're all in the same boat, this is a game where you're relying on other people to react and to overreact and to freak out and to panic. And then we take their spots. That's why
Yeah.
this is an opportunity, not a
Hmm.
challenge. Because if you can
Right.
hold your head cool, just like it's the same in the stock market, right? You profit from other people panicking and making emotional decisions. This is the
Right.
exact same decision, the exact same situation here. So it's really
Right.
all about like making rational decisions about the catalog.
Yeah, rational decisions and also be surgical, right? Don't just like kill off everything because,
Right.
you have to consider long term as well. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
well put. Okay. Should we go on to number 5?
Let's do it.
Okay. So going to commandment number 5, we're kind of moving from like the product side, the custom side to the sourcing and the supply chain side now. Okay. So number 5 is a big one, is to negotiate with your suppliers. Okay. Because the thinking is, hey, we're taking a hit because the tariffs is huge, right? So we, in order to, I mean, we want to continue doing business. We've been doing business for years. We've had good successes, but in order for us to continue, we need you to take a hit as well, for our relationship to continue, right? So you can propose, with the tariffs, we're going from FOB, like $10 to 145%. What is that? Like $10 plus $14.50. That's like $24.50, right? So we need you to help, right? So our target price is X. We'd like you to come down to X, right, for us to continue, right? There's certain factors in our favor right now because the Chinese currency, the RMB, has been depreciating. A lot of people overlook this, but whenever like the current, whenever there's like trade tension, one of the levers that China can pull is their RMB. They can manipulate that because
Hmm.
this is controlled by the
Right.
government. It's not free, convertible currency, right? So I was looking at the stock chart. I don't have the image in front of me right now, but there's been about a 6% depreciation in the past 24 months. I expect it to continue. So when it depreciates, it means the dollar is more valuable. So if you quote it in dollars, that means your dollar, you're getting more in their currency. So that's one lever that you can mention. Like
Yeah,
we know,
that is a
like,
great point.
RMB has been depreciated, right? So you can at least get that if you haven't negotiated in the past 2 years, at least get that 6%, right? But you should ask for more. Don't limit yourself to 6% because we're talking 145. I'm not saying we should do it 50-50, but see what they can do. Okay, because
Yeah,
China's
that's a
hurting
great
right
point.
now.
Yeah, knowing
Yeah,
that the dollar is worth more to them, they're actually getting paid more for the same
yeah,
price in RMB than they
yeah,
were before. So
yeah,
they, and they're keeping that, little fat extra margin for themselves if they haven't brought it up to you. So
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
that's a really great point, and that's a good little
Yeah,
negotiation
I
tactic
expect it
to
to
change the price.
depreciate further because every time things get tougher and for China to export, that's a lever they can pull. So it
Yeah, they
used to
have full
be as
control
low.
over it.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's right now it's like 7.2 RMB to 1 USD, 7.3. It used to be like historically so low, it was like 8.3, right? Like the higher the number is, like the lower the value of the currency. So there could be more room for it to go down. I expect it to go down because that makes the goods in China cheaper, right? So definitely negotiate that. One thing is price, but the other big thing that sellers overlook, like probably 8 or 9 out of sellers, they never negotiate this. And me coming from a supply chain background, I did this for about like 11 years in Shanghai, is payment terms, right? Payment terms that you can open up better cash flow. So rather than 30/70, do 0% down, 100% upon shipment, or 100% net 30, 100% net 60, depending on your relationship with the supplier, depending on the grind sheet, depending on how desperate they are. Okay, not every supplier is willing to do that. Sometimes they have to pay for the raw materials, but right now, like, China it's getting tougher and tougher, right? They could be hurting. So definitely, negotiate the payment terms as well, because that can help open up the cash flow. So much so, like, imagine if you do like net 60, you can land the product, you can start selling the product. Maybe you can get some of that money back so you don't have to front load, the cash flow as much, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
And this
So
all ties
negotiate.
in with the storage terms as well that we were talking about before.
Yes.
Having them produce and store items for you means that when the tariffs reach whatever their long-term equilibrium is going to be, you
Yeah.
can ship it out right away.
Yeah.
Create a purchase
Yeah.
order and ship it out if they're holding it on your behalf. So it
Yeah.
allows you to respond quicker once we reach, what our long-term equilibrium is going to be. And all these
Yeah.
factors come into play. This is a multi-tiered approach we need to take to be able to react to the situation rationally.
Yeah, yeah. That's another thing you can negotiate for storage, right? Most times the Chinese factories, they're open to, holding your products, in their warehouse until you
Yep.
need it. And the other thing is you don't have to pay for that yet, right? You can negotiate that. You can,
Hmm.
you can place a PO for like 100,000 units, or, like 10,000 units, ship like 1,000 first, hold those 9,000 and tell them, I'm going to pay you when we ship it. I'm not going to pay you for everything up front,
Right.
right? So
Exactly.
that opens up your cash flow even more, right? Until you wait the tariffs out, right? So those are at least three ways that you can negotiate. I mean, there's like so much. Well, we can talk about this for like another hour, but like we got some more to cover. I know you want to make this snappy, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Should
So
we?
we
Yeah,
could go on to commandment 6.
okay. Commandment 6. Okay, is another type of Incoterm quotation called DDP, delivered duties paid. Okay, so this is another way that you can kind of make the supplier, you know quote you based on the duties all inclusive. So it means delivered duties paid. So like I don't want to get into too much of the nitty gritty of shipping Incoterms. So usually when you get quotations, like most people get FOB free on board. That's like, to get the product onto the ship, like FOB Shanghai on the port of Shanghai, or EXWORKS EXW. EXWs means like products ready at the factory. Usually, I mean, you'll ship it by air or you'll move it yourself, right? So conversely, DDP, if you imagine like a map of like, China and the US, it means delivered duties paid, right? So that means the cost for you to have your product landed, like on your doorstep at your 3PL, or, at the Amazon fulfillment center, etc. The duties would be included. Okay. The Why you should quote for this, one of my friends, Dave Bryant, he actually suggested this because this kind of forces the hand of the Chinese suppliers to um, quote the lowest possible cost, because they're gonna embed everything in it. Okay, so I'm not saying they're gonna under declare it. I mean, possibly they could, but the onus is on them, right? Because they're making that declaration. Okay, obviously you still have to pay, delivered duties paid, including the duties as well, right? But you
But
put the
whatever
onus on
they
them.
do to
Yeah.
optimize, their costs is totally on them, not you.
Yes, what
Yeah.
yeah, whether it's on the product cost, the shipping cost, whatnot. One other thing is like kind of dissecting like the cost, because a lot of times like in the cost there could be, packaging, there could be other things like bundled items. I mean, just try to get the FOB as low as possible. If you use a sourcing agent, sometimes they embed the sourcing agent fee, that 3%, 5% into the product cost. Ask them to take it out because you're going to pay another 145% on their sourcing fee as well. So basically make it as like, bare bones as possible. Okay, commandment number 7 is to really rethink the design and the manufacturing of the product. Okay, so now's the time, put the product up on the table, look at it from all sides. What can you do to make this more optimized, right? Whether it's maybe remove some things, like maybe like an extra bundled item that people don't really care about, maybe like, like a cleaning kit or something like nobody cares about, take that out. That 50 cents, is like, more than doubled, right? Remove anything that's not necessary. Possibly look to see ways to lower the product cost without sacrificing too much quality. Maybe you can change some materials depending on your product. Okay. Another thing is, um, not just like the product itself, but also the packaging, resizing, like minimizing the size of the product so that it's as compact, as streamlined as possible. So you're not shipping air, right? Because all of these things they'll be magnified right now because we're getting hit on tariffs. So if there's any other way that you can optimize your packaging, your product, your bundled items, everything. Really rethink design and manufacturing. I think right now this is a key opportunity for that to maximize your profits. Commandment number 8 is to source outside of China. Okay, I mean the writing's on the wall. We know like who the trade war the target is right now, right? So if you can source some products from whether it's India, Vietnam, Mexico, or even nearshoring to the U.S. Right? I mean, sourcing locally. Obviously, you can't get everything locally, but if you're able to do that to mitigate the tariff impact, that'd be amazing. And we have our summit coming up soon, and we actually have speakers that will show you how to source from Vietnam. Source from Mexico, source from US, and we even have a factory owner, like an American, who owns like major stake in a Chinese factory in Shenzhen. Like they actually opened up a new factory in a new country. Um, can you guess where it is, Chris?
Vietnam.
Close. Thailand.
Oh,
Thailand.
Thailand. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. So we're seeing new factories pop up. A lot of them are Chinese owned. This is what I'm calling kind of like globalization 2.0. I mean, it's kind of excluding China, but with an asterisk, because a lot of times
Right.
those factories in Vietnam, in Thailand, they're Chinese owned, right?
Yeah,
So
China has
yeah,
had a initiative about taking over all of Southeast Asia called One Belt, One Road for like 10
yeah,
years now.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they're already all over that. But
yeah,
it's based on borders, actual
right,
borders, right? So all we
right,
have to do is find the one that works with the tariff code. That's all that really
right,
matters.
right, right. So definitely look at sourcing outside of China. That's number 8 to reduce the tariff impact. Um,
Also gives
Ju-
long-term stability in case there's more volatility related
yes,
to the trade war, even after we reach a reasonable equilibrium when it comes to goods coming directly from China.
yeah, because it's also risk, right? I mean, it's very risky to put all your eggs in one basket. If you look at like the big companies like Apple, for example, they've opened up factories in Vietnam, right, in Thailand, in India. Apple they pivoted very quickly. Another big success factor in supply chain is agility. How fast you're able to pivot and react. I don't know if you saw in
Hmm.
the news, um, Chris, right when they were, about to announce the tariffs, Apple was really smart. They were manufacturing in India, right? So to beat the tariff announcement, they actually airshipped 4 airplane loads of iPhones from India to the US to make sure they landed before April 9th, right? Before like the reciprocal tariffs hit, right? So learning from them, I mean, we got to be super agile. We got to like move quickly. We can't just like sit on our butts and try to like, wait, right? So whether it's finding that new supplier in India, in Vietnam, in Mexico, or even, in your home turf, right? In the state side. Definitely, diversify your supply chain. Like don't just count on one place. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's number 8. Okay.
And there's lots
Number
of
9.
countries to
Yep.
explore. They're using these just a sourcing websites, going
Yeah.
through Vietnam, India, but also Mexico, Thailand,
That's right.
Malaysia.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
there are
Even Europe.
plenty
Europe, we're
for
seeing,
certain things. Yeah.
Turkey, yeah, Turkey, Poland, even Germany. I mean, Germany is more high end. Italy for fruit products, we're seeing like successful sellers do that. I mean, you got to think
Hmm.
outside the box. It's not just like Alibaba for everything anymore, man. It's this is
Yeah.
like globalization 2.0. It's not just China.
Yeah, exactly. And these used to be countries where it was like second tier, like China had it figured out for certain categories, but then if you wanted like, a little bit less quality, you go to Vietnam or Thailand. But it's not like
Yeah,
that anymore. Like over the
Yeah.
last 10 years, these countries have like modernized and gotten really good. So
Yeah.
it's, the timing is right.
Yeah, yeah, and this is all a cycle, right? If you look at, like manufacturing in the 1990s, China was like, Vietnam or India today, right? They didn't have the technology, they didn't have the know-how, the labor was dirt cheap, everything was like handmade, and a lot of the manufacturing know-how, it was actually imported from Taiwan, it was imported from Hong Kong because that's when manufacturing it first started in those areas in the 80s and 90s, right? But then the labor got too expensive in those places. So
Japan,
they actually, yeah, and
even
Japan
earlier.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they shifted. Right, that's right. I mean, Japan, Taiwan and Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong, like those people, they moved across the border to China. They opened up the factories, they trained the employees, they, the operators, the engineers, and they brought like the know-how and the logistics flow. And over time, China, like they grew, and obviously, U.S. globalization in the 2000s, right? I mean, they were looking for cheap labor, so all the U.S. companies, they set up factories in China. They taught the Chinese how to do all of the all the technology and everything, right? I mean, a lot of like even well, anyways, I don't want to dive into like like a
History.
history lesson. Yeah, but let's keep going. Okay, okay, so let's go on to number 9. Okay, okay, number 9 is on the selling side. Okay, a lot of people forget Amazon operates in marketplaces all over the world, and in those marketplaces, there are no China tariffs. Okay, so think about selling in Canada, right? Amazon Canada. Think about selling in Amazon Europe, Amazon UK, Amazon Japan, right? Because like all of these Amazon marketplaces, I mean, Seller Central is the same thing, right? And then you're able to carry over the same reviews that you have in Amazon.com to Amazon Japan, right? To Amazon Germany. So day one launch, if you have like 500 reviews in US, you can have 500 reviews in Japan. You can have 500 reviews in UK. You can have 500 reviews, in Canada, right? The size of the market may not be as big, but I find like the profitability tends to be higher in those marketplaces. Why? Because competition is less, right? PPC will be less, right? There's going to be fewer competitors, and there's no tariffs, right? You're saving 145%. So the same supplier, you probably have some products like maybe like in production. Consider, you know, obviously do your homework, do product market fit analysis, use the tools out there, use brand analytics. But
And
that,
Japan, Germany, and the UK have grown so much. I mean, it's
yeah,
funny because I was looking at the graphs, and these marketplaces are the size that the US marketplace was like, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that. They've
yeah,
grown really fast to be
yeah, very
really big
rapidly.
markets.
Hmm.
So if you've been a
Hmm.
seller for a long time, you remember like the US like 10, 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the size of each of these other marketplaces now. So it's definitely nothing to balk at. These are big
Yeah.
markets.
I know of several seven-figure sellers that probably you know of as well. With the tariffs, they're kind of drawing back on US. They're focusing more on EU. They found that hey, people in Japan are buying my product. Like one of our friends, you probably know Chris Davey, right?
Hmm.
He's the British expat in China for like 20 years. He sells globally, and then I was having a conversation with him recently. He said he's kind of like stepping back from US and focusing more on EU and even Japan now because
Great
there's
markets.
no great markets, no tariffs, right? You don't have to deal with all that mess and until it boils over. And
And a
Canada
lot
as
of
well.
times, like
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
Germany, for example, the average price, top line price of the products tends to be higher and across almost every category.
Yeah, yeah, we find that, profitability tends to be higher as well. So,
Yep.
yeah, that could be a great way to, offset the tariffs. Okay,
And
so that's
again, these are
command.
all
Yep.
things that just make the business stronger. And since everyone is dealing with the same challenge, the more of these things that you act on that add strength and resilience to the business, the better position that you're in afterwards once there's this clearing of the weaker sellers. So it's
Yeah,
it's really like it's a it's one of these situations where if you hold on and you're strong and you survive and use it as an opportunity to strengthen everything because you have to, then the ones that don't are gone when you get through the storm, and you could grow faster and be stronger than ever. So for a certain type of person, this is the best thing to ever happen to the marketplace because they know that the other guy is gonna just give up because they didn't have the strength or resilience or the knowledge or the know-how or whatever it was, and that just leaves space for all of us sellers who have 100% conviction that we're getting through this, and not only getting through it but thriving through it and being even stronger on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen on the news that, a lot of sellers in China, they're quitting, right? They're raising the prices or they're quitting because they're quitting the US
Because it was just
because
a,
the
a
mark
hustle for them.
yeah.
It
Yeah,
wasn't a
yeah, it was
real
just a
business for them.
right,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And
So
that's
imagine
exactly what we
yeah,
want, right?
yeah. I mean, imagine, like, let's say if we had this conversation 6 months later or, like, 12 months later, Chris, and, let's say, God willing, China and US do strike a deal and the tariffs go into, like, a reasonable territory, and then maybe, like, a third of the businesses on Amazon, they quit, or, they stop, fulfilling inventory. Imagine the landscape, right? It's almost like rewinding, like, to, I don't know,
Yeah,
2020
exactly.
or like 2018. Can you
That's
imagine
right.
that? I mean, yeah, nobody's talking about that, right?
The
Everyone's just
Wild
talking about
West
right
again.
now, but imagine, yeah, the Wild West, the shakeout, and, like, so many people quit. So I think, you know, it is an opportunity, like what you said. It's like natural selection, right? Like the weak
Mhm.
ones or the ones that are emotional, they're gonna follow. They're gonna, go out of business, right? So hopefully these commandments, they're helping out. We got the last one. Are you ready?
Let's run it.
Okay, commandment number 10 is pricing. Okay, the last one, this is like the most direct to the bottom line. Um, Adjust your pricing wisely. And the reason I say that is we saw in the news, Anchor. Everyone knows Anchor, right? They're like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, private label brand on Amazon. They're a Chinese-based company. They do power banks, and even President Trump, like, he was seen using one of these, like, not too long ago during the campaign season, right? Anchor just raised their prices 15% across the board. Okay, there was an article just last week, just a few days ago, about this 15% price raise. Okay, I'm sure they did at least these other 9 commandments. For sure, they talk to their suppliers to adjust, their pricing, to negotiate their pricing, but they raised their price. Okay, I'm not saying you should just have a knee jerk reaction to raise your price, but you have to, survive, right? So whether or not you can, either you're gonna take a hit, right? I mean, you want the suppliers to take a hit, you got to absorb a hit, and the customer, I mean, you got to pass some of that on, right? And people, it's they're not going to be happy, but you got to survive, right?
And
Um,
everyone has to do it, right?
yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
that's again the thing where whether now or later, the prices are going to have to adjust to the long-term tariff equilibrium. So it's kind of
yeah,
like a game of chicken. Our methodology for our portfolio is we're doing price testing but not making big price jumps in the near term until necessary. So
hmm,
depending on when the stock came in and how much stock you had at the old margin versus whatever the new margin is going to settle down to, you can continue to sell and price test so that you know what impact it has on conversion, click-through rate, etc., while not freaking out and making massive price jumps, which could knock you off the rankings. So you don't want to make big price jumps. Like you wouldn't want to double your price before everyone else does, because then you're gonna get knocked down while everyone else is still selling at their old price. But it's good to do price tests so that you know the impact of different price points, so that you have better knowledge than the competition on the marketplace. And when you raise the prices, you know what the impact of that will be. And you can do it in tandem with the rest of the market because, again, everyone's in the same boat, right? So
yeah,
it's not like you're the only one hit and you're going to have to put your price above average. Hypothetically, the price should stay. If you were at average, your price will end up being average, even though that average will be higher. If you're below average, you'll still be able to be below average. The average will just be higher. And if you were above average, you'll still be above average. The whole thing just moves up, right? So you don't want to make huge swings, but also you definitely want to start testing so that you know what the impact will be of price changes. And as soon as you have to, then you have to make price changes. Earlier on, you can start doing it gradually.
Yeah. Well said. And there are tools out there as well. There's AI powered tools like from Chad Rubin, Prophecy. So
Prophecy, yeah,
this,
that's a good
yeah,
one. Auto
yeah,
pricing, yeah.
auto pricing, but it's not just like, blind auto pricing. You can set targets whether you want to, to rank or maintain your
Hmm.
profitability, and you can set guardrails as well, right? You don't want to go like infinite price as well. And then it's also based on the marketplace as well. So it looks at the competition. So if you want to, always be in line with your competitor X%, you can do that as well. And
Great tool,
Chad's great.
Prophecy.
Yeah,
Chad's
he's
awesome.
speaking
Yeah,
at
he's a
our
buddy of
event.
mine.
Yeah, he's speaking at our event as well. He's one of the OGs, like Chris, and we go way
Yeah,
back
yeah,
as
he
well.
founded
So
Prosper,
yeah,
our big,
yeah, that's right.
Amazon seller
Yeah,
event.
yeah. He wrote the
Chad's a
book
great
on
guy.
cheaper, faster,
So,
direct as well.
Gary, you
Yeah,
just alluded to it. Now that we're through the 10 commandments, you wanna, talk about the event that you're hosting?
yeah. I mean, we're doing the online seven figure seller summit um, next week or whenever this April 22nd, 23rd, 24th. And every single commandment that I spoke about, we have someone speaking about that, at the event. So I mean, this was just the tip of the iceberg. I think this will help a lot of sellers, at least like, in terms of the mindset, not panicking, taking strategic steps, right? But if you want to dive deeper, we can hook you up with a limited time free pass for the 3-day online event. We have about 20 speakers talking about profitability, AI tools, how to mitigate against the tariffs, um, PPC launch profitably. Like Chris, right? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I think so every speaker is touching on something that affects the situation that we're all in, which is supply chain optimization, margin optimization. My particular talk at the event is about launching profitably, profitable product launches. So, I'm contributing to the side of the story that is we'll come out of this much stronger and make sure that we continue doing what we need to do to grow these businesses, which is launch products and focusing
Yeah,
on how to do that with Amazon PPC. So it was really great. We
yeah,
walked through, some real examples, and I'm also super excited to be checking out some of these other speakers who are talking through, all of these tactics to increase margin, increase profitability, so that we come out of this stronger than we ever were.
yeah. And I feel like right now it's like us sellers, we're the resistance, and we're dealing with the tariff overlords, and we're dealing with the Amazon fee increases, and like black hat competition, left and right. So we're getting people like Chris, to help train you guys so e-com sellers can strike back, right? We're gonna be successful this year, despite the circumstances. We're gonna be strategic. We're not gonna panic. So that's my mission. I'm doing, this is the 10th time I'm doing it. So I've been doing this since 2018. We were voted favorite Amazon conference, number of years in a row, and we've been featured in Forbes. But anyways, I think we'll let the audience speak for themselves, and hopefully we can help you guys, survive and thrive through these turbulent times to come out stronger.
That's right. So yeah, for those of you guys that want to dive deeper on this subject and other margin related and tariff related subjects, check out the Seven Figure Seller Summit. Gary's been hosting this event for a really long time. I've been a part of it for a long time. It's one of my favorite events, if not my favorite digital event in the Amazon space. Gary just knows everyone, and he just gets all of the people who are actually doing this, who are actually selling, who are actually spending dollars, on the marketplace, on Amazon PPC and every other category. So yeah, highly recommend you guys check that out. Gary, thanks for coming on and having this discussion. Super timely, super relevant. Love these tactics. It was great chatting back and forth with you. Any final notes and thoughts?
The final notes, I mean, I'm all about the 80/20 rule. I feel that, again, with crisis comes opportunity, right? I mean, look at it,
100%.
glass half full. A lot of these people are exiting. A lot of people may not survive. A lot of people will panic. But I mean, with these 10 commandments, I mean, you guys can survive and thrive. And like what you said, Chris, when the tide rises, all of the boats are rising, right? So it's not just you. Like everyone's dealing with the same thing, but you don't see like Apple throwing in the towel. You don't see Nintendo throwing in the towel,
Right.
right? So I mean, there's things that we can learn, right? So yeah, that's what I would suggest, guys. So yeah, good luck out there, and hopefully we'll see you at the summit soon.
And there you go, my brand owners out there. You guys are the strong ones. Remember, Albert Einstein said that in every crisis is opportunity. And Warren Buffett said that when everyone's greedy, I get fearful. But when everyone's fearful, I get greedy. You guys should be the ones viewing this as an opportunity, not as an insurmountable challenge, and using it as an excuse to fortify your business and make it even stronger than it was before, taking over the gap left by competitors that flood out of the space out of fear, so that we can flood in and take their market share. And in the spirit of continuing to grow and expand, I made a video on a product launch we recently did that made $100,000 in 90 days at a 14% ACoS. We launched it only using Amazon PPC. You can check out that video right here, and I will see you over there.